Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. Today, we're going to be talking about The Conjuring. The devil made me do it. The devil made them go up to the top of the box office, or maybe it was just the people that went to the movies. Whatever you choose to believe. We'll also talk about the second week of A Quiet Place Part 2. We're going to look at the worldwide box office, the summer box office. It's a pretty meat and potatoes episode of the show today, but still a lot to get to as we get into the heart of the summer movie season. And let's start with a look at the domestic box office take for this weekend. As I mentioned, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, is the number one film for the weekend, coming in at just over $24 million. Warner Brothers is a little bit late, as usual, later than usual, I should say, at reporting their box office figures, their final figures. So right now, we're still stuck with their estimate. A Quiet Place Part 2 takes the number 2 spot at $19.2 million. It's about a 60% drop off from last week. Not too bad considering A, it's a horror movie, B, it is not a usual, still a theatrical picture, a pretty good hold for that movie there. Cruella in its second week with $11 million in the third spot. At number 4, another new film, Spirit Untamed, a revisiting of one of the very first DreamWorks animated movies. And at number 5, in week 14, it just barely edged out Wrath of Man. I think it was by like $20,000 or less when the final numbers came in. But Raya and the Last Dragon in its 14th week, staying in the top 5. The Conjuring was also the number one movie worldwide. There weren't a whole lot of movies that were tracked this weekend, but these were the top 5 that I was able to track down. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, taking in over $50 million worldwide, so the U.S. contributing about half of its worldwide gross in its opening weekend. Financially, this works because the budgets on the Conjuring films are still pretty low, between $30 and $40 million reportedly, so it looks like this movie is going to make money in the theatrical marketplace. A Quiet Place Part 2 is in second place with $38.7 million worldwide. Cruella not too far behind, $29.8 million. F9, as we talked about last week, fading fast in China. In its third week of release, it is in fourth place with $13.3 million, so it's really going to be looking for a boost from the domestic release later this month. And at number 5, Stand By Me Doraemon 2, which is a Chinese film, with $7.7 million. It was also in the top 5 worldwide last week. So there's a lot to dig down into with these Conjuring numbers, and there are also a lot of X factors that we just don't know about. Let's look at where The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It falls in with the openings in the other entries in the franchise. Not just the Conjuring films, but in the Conjuring universe, if you will. This movie did not make the top 5. When you look at the top 5 openings for the Conjuring films, The Nun, which in my opinion is by far the worst of all these movies. Well, maybe not by far. The Curse of La Llorona wasn't very good either, but I really did not like The Nun. It had the biggest domestic opening at over $53 million. The Conjuring, the first film, $41.8 million back in summer 2013. Then The Conjuring 2, an almost identical opening a couple years later at $40.4 million. Annabelle, the first film, at number 4 with $37.1 million. Annabelle Creation at number 5 with $35 million. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, out of the 8 Conjuring films, was 7th out of 8. It only topped the opening weekend of Annabelle Comes Home, which, first of all, yes, it could very well be that there is some franchise fatigue there, but you have to keep in mind that we are still in, even though it seems like we're getting closer and closer to normal, and thank goodness for that, we are still in some very special circumstances. Number 1, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It was also available on HBO Max day and date, and I am sure there are many people, and I saw a lot of people talking in my YouTube reviews, etc., that did not go to the theaters that would have gone, that chose to watch that film at home. Number 2, Canada, which does count toward the domestic box office, is still almost completely closed. So when you look at the fact that The Conjuring this past weekend was able to make the amount of money that it made, around $24 million, given that it's the third movie in the franchise, also given all of these different X factors, the theaters being closed in Canada, the fact that you can watch it at home if you have HBO Max, I think this is a pretty good performance from The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. And I think it's another example that there are people that are just wanting to go back to the theater. Even if they can watch a movie at home, they still want to go back to the theater. There's another test coming up this weekend with In the Heights, which is another movie that will be available day and date on HBO Max. Maybe it's working out for them. I don't know their numbers. If you ask me, I thought it was a mistake, first of all, for them to roll it out the way that they did at the beginning of the year. But I also think that it's just way too early for them to have done this for the entire year, because the numbers that I'm seeing are showing me that there are people that are ready to go back to the theater. Unless the HBO Max sign-up numbers are through the roof, and this is helping them to get and retain subscribers, and that may very well be the case, what I'm seeing now is them pushing people away from their theaters. And if they're not making up that income on the HBO Max side, which we will never know, then I know that they're losing money on the theatrical side. According to all the data that I could find, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It also was the top per theater grossing at over $7,700 per theater. A lot of the smaller films have been slow to report grosses, and I've been looking at all the different reports and seeing if I can find movies. For example, last week, I was able to figure out what movie actually was the number one film per theater, which was not A Quiet Place Part 2, actually. It was a Vietnamese film. But this appears to have been the movie, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, that was the per theater winner. If that changes or if that gets updated, I will let you know next week. Let's see where this leaves us as far as the 2021 domestic box office picture. This is an interesting race here. So Godzilla vs. Kong is at number one with $99.1 million. Quiet Place Part 2 made a nice advance in its second week. It now has $88.3 million. So now we have a little bit of a race to see which movie is going to be able to claim the title of the first film to gross $100 million domestically since the pandemic began last March, or at least since theaters began closing due to the pandemic last March. I think this is going to be a pretty close race. Godzilla vs. Kong is about $900,000 off the lead. A Quiet Place Part 2, a little bit less than $12 million away from that $100 million mark. Godzilla vs. Kong's weekly numbers last week were about $1.3 million. So that's going to drop because it does drop week to week. And Quiet Place Part 2 obviously making money much, much more quickly. So this is going to be a very close race. I'm going to try to watch it. This may come down to the daily. We don't talk about this a whole lot outside of opening weekends. The daily box office numbers to see which movie actually officially crosses this mark first. One of them will have done it for sure by next week's show. I will let you know which movie does officially get it, because it really could come down to what a movie does on this Thursday versus what the other movie does on the next Friday. This is going to be a very close race. At number 3 is Raya and the Last Dragon with $53.5 million. Then Demon Slayer the movie and Tom and Jerry. That hasn't changed, the top 5. At number 6, Cruella. Cruella is going to be in the top 5, maybe as high as number 3 by next weekend, depending on how it does this week. It drops Mortal Kombat down one spot to number 7. Then we have Nobody and Wrath of Man at number 8 and number 9. And at number 10, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. It's a horror on horror box office slaughter. Drops Spiral from the Book of Saw out of the 2021 domestic top 10. That movie will also be climbing this chart in the days and weeks to come. Let's look at the worldwide picture for 2021, and there aren't a whole lot of changes here. Hi Mom, Detective Chinatown 3, Godzilla vs. Kong, F9, and Cliffwalkers are all there in the top 5. F9, after its steep drop-off in the Chinese market, has a lot of ground to cover to get to that number 3 spot. But just for comparison, the last film, The Fate of the Furious, made nearly $400 million in China alone. Right now, it is at half that total, and it is not going to make up a whole lot more ground. So there's going to be a massive drop-off between the numbers for The Fate of the Furious and F9 in China. That's even more pressure for F9 to cross that gap. It is going to be number 3. It is going to cross the path with Godzilla vs. Kong unless things go disastrously for it in just about every other market around the world. But F9 is going to be one of those movies. Ironically, it was delayed and delayed and delayed so many times because Universal knew that that franchise was such a draw in the global market. It may be a movie that actually ends up disappointing in the global market compared to what the previous films did for reasons that are completely unrelated to the pandemic and maybe related to the movie itself. Who knows? I'm not going to see it for a couple more weeks. We're not going to see it here in the U.S. till a few weeks from now in late June. We will see what happens with F9, but it looks like it's going to stall out right there at number 4 for a while. Cliffwalkers is at number 5, A Writer's Odyssey is at number 6, Sister at number 7. A Quiet Place Part 2 enters the list at number 8 with $121 million global gross. That knocks down Raya and the Last Dragon down one slot and Tom and Jerry down one slot. Endgame drops out of the list. But we also have now, for the first time, it's a 50-50 list. We have 5 Chinese films and 5 US-made films. That's the most films that the US has had on the chart all year, I believe. And so this is another step. We'll see. We've got some more big US productions coming in. We'll see if Cruella can enter that chart, etc. But a little bit of equalization to this chart, which was dominated by Chinese films earlier in the year. Now let's take a look at one of my favorite charts. It's a newer one that we're doing here. It's the previous 365 days chart. So today's June 7th. This is the previous 365 days in box office from June 7th, 2020. Spoiler alert, not much was going on, to today, June 7th, 2021. What were the top 10 of those previous 365 days? Godzilla vs. Kong is number 1. It's the same race that's going to be going on for the 2021 domestic box office as to which movie is going to cross that threshold first. However, regardless of who crosses it first, A Quiet Place Part 2 is going to take that title and keep it until another movie passes that threshold. The Croods: A New Age at number 3 drops down 1 spot. Tenet drops down 1 spot. It's the old man on the list, 278 days and counting. It can smell 300. It's less than 3 months away from spending a full year on this chart. Will it happen? We'll find out. Raya and the Last Dragon at number 5. Demon Slayer and Wonder Woman at 6 and 7. Tom and Jerry at number 8. Cruella moves up 1 spot to number 9. Mortal Kombat moves down 1 spot to number 10. As I mentioned, we're now into June, which means we're into the heart of the summer box office season. So let's look at the summer box office top 10. And based on some of your suggestions, I'll also be reminding you week to week of what movies I predicted would be in the top 10. Right now, A Quiet Place Part 2 has an easy hold on the number 1 spot at $88 million. Cruella, the second highest grossing film of the summer. Wrath of Man at number 3. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. It will quickly surpass Wrath of Man to take that 3rd spot. Spiral from the Book of Saw drops down 1 spot to number 5. And then these are all dead movies walking, but Those Who Wish Me Dead at number 6. Spirit Untamed enters the list at number 7. Here Today, Finding You, and Dream Horse all moved down 2 spots, and we lost 2 movies off the list. Profile and the re-release of Scoob, both being supplanted by the 2 new wide releases this weekend. And just as a reminder, here was my prediction for the top 10 summer movies. So I have Black Widow at number 1, The Suicide Squad and Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings at 2 and 3, F9 at number 4. I'm going to have a test here this weekend with In the Heights because I picked it to be in the top 10. We'll see how that opening goes. I did pick A Quiet Place Part 2 to be the 6th highest grossing film of the summer, followed by Free Guy, which will not be released for a while, Hotel Transylvania, Transformania, which will not be released for a while. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It was number 9 on my list. We'll see if it can stick around. And then at number 10, I selected Candyman, which we're not going to see for a while. So the verdict is not going to be in on these movies for quite some time, but I'm going to keep that list handy as movies start dropping in and dropping out. One movie that's doing all right so far, Cruella. Not on my list. If Cruella can stick around, if it can stick around and stay in the top 10, then that'll be a notch out of my belt. It's going to knock something off of my top 10. This is always a very malleable at the beginning of the summer. Nobody really knows what's going to happen, but I will keep you updated on the status of my films, the ones that I picked. And this is going to be a very interesting summer box office year. Maybe the most unpredictable box office year that I've ever done. Lots to cover, and I will keep you updated on that. Before we go, I also want to look at the streaming charts, and I've seen a little bit of feedback about the streaming charts. Some people saying maybe it's time to retire them because we're going back to the movies. I don't think I want to retire them completely, but I would welcome your feedback if you have any thoughts on what you'd like to see. If you want to keep the charts as they are, maybe condensing them. I saw a suggestion perhaps to do it to a top 5 for each one of these services, and so it's just one chart. Or if you like seeing them all spread out separately the way that they are, if you have a strong opinion either way, let me know, because I love doing this show, but I also want to make sure you love watching the show and enjoy watching the show. So let me know if you have any suggestions. But for now, we're going to keep the streaming charts the way we've been doing them, and we're going to start with Amazon. The top 10 movies rented or bought on Amazon. They don't delineate on their charts about whether it's a purchase or a rental. The premium video on demand for Wrath of Man stays at number 1. Spiral from the Book of Saw at number 2. A Quiet Place, the 4K rental at number 3, followed by Game Night. Game Night has been on and off this chart since last year, people just love this movie, and it's a really good movie, so I'm glad that people still enjoy watching it. Godzilla vs. Kong, available for purchase only at number 5. The HD rental of A Quiet Place at number 6. Chaos Walking and Nobody at number 7. The Courier opens its rental window. It's there at number 9. And John Wick Chapter 3, another movie that's very popular on this chart, at number 10. Let's take a look at what people are watching through Apple and iTunes. And as I mentioned, The Courier, actually available for purchase and rental on iTunes, is at number 1. Wrath of Man, the premium video on demand, at number 2. A Quiet Place doing well on this chart as well at number 3. The Dry at number 4. Liam Neeson in The Marksman at number 5. Spiral from the Book of Saw, which was not on the top 10 last week despite being available as a premium video on demand title, is in the top 10 this week. It's there at number 6. Edge of the World, which is a buy rent, is new there at number 7. Chaos Walking and Minari, both there at 8 and 9. And then Tom and Jerry, the buy rental window is open for that one, so people checking that out on iTunes. And finally, let's see what people are watching on Netflix. At number 1 is the Netflix original series Sweet Tooth. At 2, Lucifer, which is a Netflix series, although it did not originate there on Netflix. Dirty John, Betty Broderick, the sequel series to the first season of Dirty John, is at number 3. Two Hearts, a non-Netflix movie, is at number 4. The Netflix original movie Doggone Trouble at number 5. Home at number 6. At number 7, Coco Melon, which apparently has new episodes, which means it's going to stay on this chart. I went back and looked. I don't know the exact first origin of Coco Melon, but it's been on this chart, the Netflix overall top 10, since at least January, because I went back and looked, and it was popping on and off the chart for most weeks from the beginning, from the very first charts episode starting back in January. It may even have gone back further, back into 2020. So we're now looking at half a year easily of Coco Melon consistently being on the top 10 on Netflix. New episodes, which means it's going to stick around. Extreme, a Netflix original movie, is at number 8. Army of the Dead, the Netflix original movie, is at number 9. And Monsters vs. Aliens from DreamWorks Animation is at number 10. When we narrow it down just to the movies that people are watching on Netflix, at number 1 is Two Hearts, then Doggone Trouble, Home, Extreme, Army of the Dead, and Monsters vs. Aliens, all carryovers from the overall top 10. The Interpreter, starring Nicole Kidman, is there at number 9. The Mitchells vs. the Machines and Blue Miracle, two Netflix originals, are at number 8 and 9. And Flipped is there at number 10. And that wraps it up for us here on the show, but it is going to be a busy week. First of all, In the Heights is opening wide in theaters this weekend. No advanced screening so far for that, so I have plans to go see it. Already have tickets to go see it on Thursday afternoon, so stay tuned. On Thursday evening, you'll have my review of In the Heights. Peter Rabbit 2, The Runaway, one of the very first movies to move due to the pandemic, also finally hitting theaters this weekend. I don't know if I'm going to bring you a review for that movie, but I enjoyed the first one, so I may very well go and see it. It's also just going to be a very busy week in general here on the channel. Tomorrow morning, when the embargo drops, I will have my non-spoiler review of the first 2 episodes of Loki, which premieres on Disney Plus this week. I told you it was a very busy week. Also, after the premiere of the first episode, based on what I've seen so far, I will be doing spoiler reviews of each episode of Loki. And of course, we'll have, as always, all my movies on Wednesday. That will be covering one of the best action movies of all time, Terminator 2, Judgment Day. It's a really fun episode, and I'm excited to bring that one to you. And the live show will be happening at some point this week. The scheduling with everything, with Loki and all my movies on Wednesday, going to see the movie and reviewing it on Thursday for In the Heights. That may very well push the live show to Friday, so stay tuned. I will keep you updated on my Twitter account and also on the other programming on this channel exactly when we're going to be doing this week's live show. We're moving it around quite a bit, and I know that's not ideal. I don't want to do that either, but given the embargo dates and given the fact that I just don't know when I'm going to see a lot of these movies, I kind of have to be a little malleable and push that live show back and forth a little bit. So more than likely, stay tuned on Friday for the live show for this week. Lots of stuff to catch up on, lots of fun stuff to do this week. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to see even more of what I'm up to, and I don't know how you could possibly have time to do it, but you can check me out over on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We just picked our movie club theme for this month. We're also going to be doing our watch along, our monthly AMA, lots of great stuff. I'd love to have you come and take part. And as I mentioned, don't forget my podcast, All My Movies. It'll be out this Wednesday and every week. Thank you for watching this episode of Charts with Dan. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time. Bye.